Welcome back to MedCity FemFwd, a podcast dedicated to discussing the breakthroughs and challenges in the women's health space. I'm Marissa Plescia, reporter for MedCity News. According to Yale Medicine, about 15% of couples in the U.S. struggle with conception, and in more than 50% of cases, there is a male infertility issue. Despite this, infertility is often viewed as a women's issue. Here to talk about why infertility shouldn't just be put on women, we have Pam Pure of Posterity and Khaled Kteily of Legacy. Hi, Khaled and Pam. Thanks so much for joining MedCity FemFwd. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so we're talking today about fertility and how it's become considered a women's issue despite also affecting men. Before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about yourselves and your companies, maybe starting with you, Pam?
Yeah, so I'm Pam Pure. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Posterity Health. Spent most of my career in digital healthcare. And we started Posterity Health to provide a center of excellence for male reproductive care. We bring together fellowship-trained reproductive urologists and care teams exclusively focused on the male, with a proprietary technology platform that makes our care accessible and convenient for men. They can receive care in their home, they can receive care in the office with us, and our services are covered by most insurance companies and all of the fertility benefit managers to help make that care more affordable.
And I'm Khaled Kteily, founder and CEO of Legacy. Male fertility space as well. We actually work quite closely with Pam and the Posterity team, who have been fantastic. We're a venture capital backed company that developed a mail-in solution for anyone who's thinking about testing or freezing their sperm. We've raised about $50 million from investors like Bain Capital Ventures, Y Combinator, as well as some celebrities like Justin Bieber, my personal favorite. We handle more sperm than just about anyone. We work with everyone from the U.S. military and the Navy SEALs on the one end of the spectrum, and then on the other, we work with the LGBTQIA plus community. So really what we say is, look, if you've got sperm, we've got you covered, and we can help you test and freeze that sperm.
Great. Thank you both so much. And as I mentioned earlier, historically, fertility has always been considered a women's issue instead of a couple's issue. Bringing it back to you, why is that not the case?
Yeah, I think that the reality of this situation is when a couple is having trouble getting pregnant, in at least 50% of the cases, there's a male factor involved. And I think the sad thing that we've discovered is most men wait almost 2 years to get tested after a couple is experiencing infertility. It causes tremendous stress on both partners and a lot of unnecessary testing. And that's why our partnership with Legacy is so important. Early evaluation of the male, early testing can really accelerate the process for every couple and help every couple find their fastest path to pregnancy. So we're really focused on shifting that burden of care from the woman and unifying the couple from the start to deal with fertility as a joint adventure.
Yeah. Look, it's a point of view that's outdated and wrong. It belongs in the 1970s. The reality is, as Pam mentioned, this really is a 50-50 issue. You need a healthy sperm, you need a healthy egg. What I would say is probably one of the biggest enemies that we have as an industry is Robert De Niro. I have some beef to pick with him, specifically because people read the news. He was a father at the age of 79. And so therefore people assume that men can have healthy children and healthy pregnancies at any age. That is fundamentally, factually, scientifically incorrect. And we now know that sperm counts have plummeted over the past few decades. We now know that the older the father, the more DNA damage that builds up in the sperm and can lead to congenital issues like autism spectrum disorder in your children. And so this kind of mindset that we've had for decades that places the burden entirely on women, frankly, is bullshit. And we have a lot of work to do to change that preconception and help people understand that if you want to have a healthy baby with a partner, then both of you should be getting tested. Both of you should be thinking about what that journey is going to look like, because ultimately you have the same goal in mind, which is a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. And if you're not addressing the male side of that, then you're doing yourself and your partner a disservice.
Yeah, It's so easy. I think there's just a tremendous lack of knowledge, and there's so much tied to these old stereotypes that it prevents people from taking action and being proactive in the management of their fertility. I believe if people understood that it's a 50-50 opportunity, that more men would lean in and be tested earlier. And the best thing is that there are many treatment protocols that will help a male improve their sperm quality. So if we can complete the testing, and if we find an issue, there's a 60+% likelihood that we can actively improve the sperm quality for that couple and optimize their chance of getting pregnant. So, I always tell people, why not? Go to Legacy, order a kit online, get tested. And, if you find an issue, find it up front, find it proactively, and then seek the appropriate care. And for most of these men, they don't ever have to leave their home to get the support that they need.
100%.
Yeah, very well said, both of you. Pam, you mentioned earlier that you have a partnership with Legacy. Can you both tell me a little bit more about what this partnership looks like?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the fact that to make this work, we have to encourage males to be tested. And the earlier they're tested, the more accelerated the path to pregnancy can become. And that's why our partnership is so important. The at-home testing component makes it very easy, very inexpensive for a male to test their fertility. Once those test results come back, the Legacy team can notify us if there is a patient with an abnormal result that wants to immediately talk to a reproductive urologist or someone who specializes in the care that they need. This process used to take months. The male would have to go to a lab. They'd have to wait 3 or 4 months to see a specialist. Then they would have to come back and get the second visit. We've literally, working together, compressed that process so it can occur for a male in a week. It really does change the entire process of understanding your fertility. And I just can't stress enough how important it is for the couple to go through this together. If there are issues, it's a super stressful time. And having both partners at the table from the beginning, starting with the testing process, I think is really a unifying experience. The saddest cases I see are the people who can't get pregnant, or the people who have been trying for 4 to 6 years and then finally find out that their male partner has a significant male factor issue that was never diagnosed. And so there's so much that we can do with partnerships like this that truly accelerate care and bring both partners to the table.
And I want to underscore what Pam is saying, which is just how revolutionary it is that now 1 week, end to end, you can get tested, you can get your results, you can speak to a doctor, you can figure out your next protocol. I mean, I've gone through this process many years ago when I first got my sperm tested and frozen. The whole process took a month. It took a month just to schedule the visit. I then had to go in person to a clinic, and any guy who knows anything about that experience knows that it is terrible and awkward and stigmatized and so uncomfortable. Now, and we do this work with Posterity, you get this Legacy kit delivered to your home. You're able to do everything from the comfort of your own home, ship it back to our lab, we'll test it, we'll freeze it, and Posterity handles end to end everything that you are going to need in order to be supported on that journey. And this is tapping into, and what Posterity is doing so excellently is tapping into these massive industry tailwinds, because we now know that sperm is at more risk than ever. Already, sperm is an important part of the fertility equation. Those issues are really only increasing. We're seeing environmental concerns, we're seeing pollution concerns, we're seeing chemical concerns, phthalates and BPAs and forever chemicals and microplastics, and all of these things that mean that every single person out there who has sperm should be thinking about how to test their fertility and understand where they're at, and consider preserving their fertility so that they've locked in a younger, healthier sperm for the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. Few people talk about the fact that men also have a reproductive life cycle. You talk about women and starting to ovulate, you talk about women in menopause, but no one talks about the male.
Yeah.
And it's not just about infertility, it's also about making decisions. Do I want to have a vasectomy? And if I
Hmm.
do have a vasectomy,
Hmm.
and something happens and I make the decision that I want to have another child, have I frozen my sperm? Have I considered the long term impact of these decisions that I'm making? What happens as I age to my hormone levels and
Totally.
hormone processes? And that's where we come in as the trusted partner for the male going through this reproductive life cycle. And through our partnership, it's the at home testing. It's that option before you do the vasectomy. Do I want to cryopreserve my sperm to preserve optionality? And it's those discussions that we want to encourage all couples and all males to have, because that is part of their reproductive life cycle.
Totally.
Yeah, very well said. This issue of fertility being kind of put on the women, not really so much on the men, does that have any effect on the health of the women, maybe having to go through extra kind of treatments that maybe they wouldn't have had to if men were brought into the conversation more?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Khaled, because we just finished this incredibly interesting study, and our results came back to show that for every dollar spent on male fertility, we would save $2.30 on treating the female partner.
Amazing.
So imagine that in terms of unnecessary care, extra testing, elongated timelines, and again, starts with that simple test up front to identify any treatable male conditions at the same time the female partner is going through her initial fertility center. So the dollar savings are amazing. The opportunity for speed, which is so important to so many of these couples that are starting their journey later in life, late 30s, mid 30s, they're just critical, factors. I think in addition to the impact on the care of the female, we see every day men that have never been back to a primary care provider
Right.
since they saw their pediatrician. Every month, we diagnose testicular cancer. We diagnose underlying health conditions that are present in these men that are initially diagnosed through an abnormal sperm test, which forces us to do a little bit more testing on hormones and other things. And so I feel like this whole process is not only critical to fertility for the male partner, but just underlying health factors and the overall health optimization of the male.
Totally. And Pam's mentioning a point that is so critical. Women have an annual touch point for their fertility and their sexual health, the OBGYN. There is no OBGY men, right? There is no annual touch point for men. And I think that part of our shared belief is that we can help become that regular annual touch point. Sperm is a biomarker for your health. You can actually get a lot of insight into how healthy you are from the results of a semen analysis. And then when you move forward to, let's say you're now talking about a couple that wants to go to a clinic to get tested, folks severely underestimate a fertility clinic's financial incentives to spend less time on the male partner and actually push the couple towards IVF. I mean, to Pam's point, for every their own work, their own research, for every $1 you're spending on male fertility, you are saving $2.3. But how are you saving that money? You are saving it through less unnecessary fertility treatments like IVF. And the people who are disincentivized here are the fertility clinics who actually would prefer for a couple to be paying tens of thousands of dollars for IVF because that is their business model.
That's very interesting. And that brings me to some news that I believe was announced just this week about the Trump administration signing an executive order trying to expand access to IVF. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I will just start by saying any support of couples going through infertility in terms of care access, I think, is fabulous. And so paving the way for more couples to receive care is great progress for our industry. I think the caution I would add to that is I think it's essential that we put steps in place to make sure that every couple gets their best path to pregnancy, the right care. And when couples need IVF, we want to do anything that we can do to accelerate IVF and to prepare the sperm in a way that makes IVF successful. And believe it or not, there are a lot of things you can do to optimize sperm for IVF and ensure the success rate and the strength of the embryo. So it's an important part of that journey. But as we both said, there are other couples that can be successful without IVF. And so we just want to make sure that the system is set up to give every couple the opportunity to get the right care and the least invasive care to end up with that family that we all want so badly.
Well, we're living in a fascinating time, and I was on Bloomberg a couple of months ago, right after President Donald Trump had said that he was the father of IVF. And they asked what I thought, and I said, similar to what I'll say here, which is, I think it's terrific that the current administration is focusing on ways to help improve the birth rate, to be more pro-natalist. This is an issue in every developed country around the world, including the United States. Our birth rates are plummeting, and that is a fact. I'm happy to see that it is a priority for this administration. This executive order gives 90 days to find ways to reduce the overall cost of IVF care. I think that is certainly moving in the right direction. I remain skeptical. I have a healthy dose of skepticism simply because we have not yet actually seen what form this will take. In principle, I'm excited to see this moving forward. I want to see how this will come out in practice and how this will affect all kinds of couples that ultimately want to have a children, whether a heterosexual couple or a non-heterosexual couple.
Yeah, and I agree, but I do hope there are some simple steps that can be put in place to make sure that people are channeled to the right care. And it all starts with making sure fertility is a couple's issue. If you assess the male up front and you assess the female up front and you treat the right patient in terms of identifying where the underlying problems is, we can really provide IVF for a lot more patients, and we can get many more couples pregnant without IVF. So really, to me, our charge is to deliver the best care and really putting that step up front to evaluate both partners. We're working with a number of progressive employers that are actually putting that male test in the critical path for IVF. They don't want employees who don't need IVF to have to go through that very tough and challenging process. And really, the goal should be that fastest path to pregnancy in the least invasive way. And there are so many people that need IVF that can't get it today. Let's free up some of those slots and move in people who should be given that opportunity and move people through the process faster. The analogy I would use is, there was a time where if people had a problem, they would just go directly to surgery with orthopedic issues. And now people try PT, people try other treatments and work hard to avoid surgery unless it's really medically necessary. I think there's this medically necessary component of IVF and fertility care that will continue to evolve in this country. And I think it starts with including both couples up front.
Yeah. And in an ideal end state, what the Trump administration finds is that, hey, one of the best ways to reduce the overall cost of IVF care and make it more accessible is actually by starting with testing the male partner. And for every dollar they're going to spend, they're going to save 2.3, right? Isn't that a great way to frame up that entire work, which is start even before you get to the point where a couple is pursuing IVF?
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
going to send that straight to Doge. We're going to send that straight to Doge.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just have one last question for both of you, kind of going off of what you were about just saying. How can the healthcare industry make this into more of a couples issue instead of a women's issue? What are some things that you would like to see?
I would like to see a movement from within primary care providers, OBGYNs, REIs, really embracing this concept of care as couples care. And I think that change coming internally will drive the fastest short term acceleration because these couples are going into the existing um, clinical paths to get the care they need. I think tied to that is really the power of the fertility benefit managers and employers who can begin really educating members and employers on the importance of making this a couples issue, both from a care perspective as well as from an emotional perspective and a mental health perspective. And so that's an area we're spending a lot of time. And it takes a while, but then all of a sudden you wake up and everybody's talking about hair loss or ED or menopause, and it just becomes a fabric of the health system. And that's really what we need to work towards, making the male evaluation, the male journey, just part of the fabric of the healthcare process.
I think that's exactly right. I'd love to see I'd love to see some more research around sperm. I know that over the years we've funded work at Harvard and through Resolve, which does fantastic lobbying work. We funded research into microplastics and their effect on semen through the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. I think that's a great start. I'd love to see more press coverage talking about male fertility, the male side of the equation, not just the female side. I think that anyone in the journalistic space can help change that narrative because that's ultimately where people are learning about this topic. I'd love to see more government policies, including from the Trump administration, helping support more couples who are wanting to have children. I think these are some very simple ways to help change that mindset. I will. The last point I'll make here is I've been in this industry for about 7 years now, and on a day by day basis, the phrase I love is we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 10. Just how much the industry has shifted over the last 7 years is extraordinary. When I was first starting Legacy, my colleagues at the time thought I was absolutely gangbusters insane. They still do, but for different reasons now. Because at the time they had no concept of how sperm mattered for fertility. Whereas I think that now, in most of the social networks that we're in, most of the people who would be listening to this podcast, there is an understanding that actually sperm contributes to a healthy pregnancy. And so that is changing much more quickly than we realize on a day by day basis.
Yeah, I would just add to that. When we started Posterity a little over 3 years ago, all male fertility treatment was cash pay. It wasn't covered by the fertility benefit managers. It wasn't covered by insurance companies. And we have spent a huge amount of time, money, energy, really trying to educate those key economic players in healthcare of the importance of including the male. And when we started 2025, we are the national provider for all of the major fertility benefit managers who provide 100% coverage to the male. And really, what a barrier to be knocked down in terms of facilitating care. I think I would add one last thing is I would encourage all of the men who are visible and, high profile to step forward and say, hey, it happened to me and I got good care. We have this joke at the company that if famous people, famous women come forward and talk about fertility issues, if they say I, then it was a female factor. If they say we, it was a male factor, because no one comes forward and says, oh, it was my husband had a male factor. And we want everybody to know that's okay.
Yeah.
That's real. And I think being able to acknowledge infertility as a medical issue that equally impacts both partners is step one to making that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said, both of you. This was such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank
No,
you.
it's great to be here. Thank you.